Hey everyone, welcome back to TrueNAS Tech Talk after our brief week off there. On today's episode, we're going to get smart about our smart statistics and find a new way to view them. We'll give you some more information for the 2504 Fangtooth launch happening in a little bit over 2 weeks, and we'll get to another pack of viewer questions all the way from encryption to SAS multipathing up to dual-actuator drives. We've had a few questions about those, so we'll try to give you a little bit of insight into, what the idea is and what the plan is with those. But
I like it.
first,
A lot of variety.
yeah, there's a lot of different questions coming in, and again, we appreciate them. We do have a bunch more coming, so we'll try to make sure that we can sort these out and try to take them in packs and chunks as they come. So quick update, I guess, on 2504, Chris. I mean, RC1's been out for a little while now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been out. It's been pretty solid. We've seen really good uptake. Several thousands of yous have already updated the software and are giving us feedback, which we really appreciate. Again, thank you. That's how we can measure success, because it's one thing to have one person say, it's perfect, but it's a different thing to have several thousand people say, yeah, it's working pretty well, and not filing tickets. So
yeah, a lot of people's upgrade reports it's been completely inconsequential. I upgraded the RC when it came out, and nothing changed. So that's a great upgrade report. If that's what you have to report, is that everything just seems to be working fine, please let us know that everything's working great for you. We love to hear that.
We've been seeing that, especially because a lot of you have been using the feedback button, the little smiley face on the menu bar, and providing a rating plus a little context of, hey, I upgraded, it's working well. Like, that's great. Keep that coming in, because again, the more reports we have of, hey, nothing went wrong, it's boring, that's good. We need that. But so far, really not a lot of reports or concern about basic NAS functionality. So all the things that are in there from Electric Eel have been pretty solid. Docker apps, SMB, NFS, iSCSI, all the basic storage stuff, all appears to be in pretty good shape. Of course, the bulk of the tickets coming in have still been around VMs and LXC containers, which we've been talking about. We expect it. That's why it's an experimental feature. Please keep those coming in. Quite a few of those items have already been addressed and have been merged into the Fangtooth nightly train, and we've started our internal testing of those fixes now. So over the next few weeks, we'll see some of those things get probably touched up a little bit further, but they're looking pretty good and solid now for the release. I'm pretty happy with that. And speaking of release, you hinted at it in the intro there, a little over 2 weeks. So on or around April 15th is when we're expecting that to go live. So mark your calendar. Man, some of you just beat me to the punch every time. I wake up in the morning, I check the forums. People are already like, where's the update? Where's the update? Where's the update?
Yeah.
Hold your horses. It'll go out around the usual time, which is noonish to afternoon Eastern time here in the States. So
yeah,
keep that in mind.
There's lots of people sitting there just waiting, clicking that update button as soon as it comes out. Typically, we've got a few reports of, the update's available even before we post our announcement thread or, get the blog up.
I love the enthusiasm, but hang tight. Again, it'll all go out during the course of that day. Speaking of other 2504 news, though, I do need to go upgrade my Ubuntu that I'm running here. I guess they just dropped their new beta as well. That's exciting. I got to go play with the new GNOME 48 features, and I think triple buffering lands. So let's see if it looks shinier. Need that eye candy.
Yeah, it's exactly. Less screen tearing, the better.
Absolutely. So, excited to go grab that as well. And April's shaping up to be a banner month.
Awesome.
Okay. So our other key topic, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk about the smart statistics. So the smart statistics, for those of you who don't know, that's basically your health check for your hard drives. That's going to give you sort of some of that early warning capabilities. We leverage this quite a bit in TrueNAS. We want to give you the information. If your drive records that it says, hey, I needed to reallocate a sector on your drive because of some physical damage, it's going to log that in its internal logs. It's also keeping note of things like how long the drive's been spinning, how many times it's been powered on and off, if it had to do an unexpected shutdown, like a sudden power cut getting pulled from it, if you had a power failure and you don't have a UPS. All of that information is recorded on the drive itself in these smart logs. So, Chris, tell us about some of the changes. If you can trust it.
Well, if you can trust it, there's been some recent noise about that elsewhere, but
I was going to say, once they're in your system, you could probably trust the Delta from that point on. But maybe we won't dig into that right now, but there's been some issues with smart logging, certainly.
If you're curious, go Google it or look it up on our Reddit or forums. There's been a lot of discussion around that.
Yeah, those of you who are buying, even first-hand drives, it seems, there's a couple different issues where maybe some, I don't know if it's refurbishers or resellers, are trying to erase and reset the smart statistics. It's kind of like rolling back the odometer on a car. It's a pretty scummy thing to do. So it's worth taking a look into that if you're concerned about if you're buying recertified or refurbished drives, especially. But
Absolutely. But
let's talk about something that we're doing to try and give
yeah,
people,
yeah.
more
So,
transparency as opposed to
something more
less.
positive
Yeah.
than that. So one of the things going on in Goldeye, if anybody's running the nightlies and has started playing, is you'll see we've been moving some things around related to smart. We're undertaking a lot of work to streamline and kind of modernize some of the smart integration, which really hasn't changed much since, oh gosh, like TrueNAS, FreeNAS 11 days. It's been pretty static there. It's mostly just a direct port. So some of the things we're doing is we're actually going to be removing the scheduling task page, where that's going to no longer be required. Now, before everyone freaks out, and some of you always have the worst takes on this, like, oh my God, they took something out. No, we're streamlining it. We're making it just internal and optimized. It's a passive thing that just happens now. You don't need to go create a task. So what this means is we're not changing anything on the back end tools, scripts. All your smart related things are still there. It mostly has to do with just how we schedule and how we run and when we run those. Smart's going to become a little bit more of an implementation detail where the system just handles it automatically. And the more important thing is it alerts where appropriate. In other words, there's a lot of smart noise that gets mixed in with the signal. We want to do a better job of filtering out the noise and really telling you if there's something you should pay attention to here. So things like uncorrectable errors or various self-test failures, those obviously we're going to surface right away. And in the background, of course, we're always monitoring for that. And you don't have to go click buttons in a UI to go turn that on now. So that's a good thing overall. So again, please have a good take about this. And you'll still, of course, have your ability to go get smart result output directly. You can go into the devices page, click a button, see all the gory details if you want. But we've also added a couple other cool features and functionality, which we think will make this an overall net positive for everyone. Which is, first of all, if you haven't noticed recently, if you're running Electric Eel or the Fangtooth betas, we added an app to the app catalog called Scrutiny, which is awesome. You should take a look at that. That's actually going to give you additional introspection into things with a nice UI on top of it that we didn't even have in the original smart implementation. Our old smart scheduler had a lot of filtering where you couldn't put in certain aux parameters. You couldn't go and kind of do the fine tuning you may wanted to do if you have very particular hardware and you want to query it in a certain way. There was restrictions there. We didn't really let you nerd out as deep as we would have liked to. Well, you can now do that by just clicking a button, installing an app, and hack away. It also allows a wider range of devices potentially to be used, so more exotic hardware, USB, etc. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. I was going to say, it is a pretty quick install. When he says click a button, I mean, I literally did it one time live on a call when we were just discussing it. It took me about 30 seconds to just click through the installation, set it up. The web UI was there, and I had all of the information I needed on my drives. Really, really easy to get going. I'll make sure I put a shot on the screen up for those of you watching us on YouTube.
Yep.
It's pretty rapid.
It's very rapid. It's nice. Again, if it takes you longer than 5 seconds to deploy it, you're probably doing it wrong. So ask a question, because it literally should be just click and go. But related to that is, of course, people are going to ask, well, what about my old smart tasks? Well, the good news is we didn't leave you hanging. We are going to migrate those over to cron tasks, so they'll show up in the UI. You can still go modify them. If you're running something custom, feel free. You can either keep that or just delete it and go use Scrutiny if it gives you far better results than you were getting out of that original task. And the other big thing that I got to mention, the benefit, is how we do temperature monitoring. So we historically were doing that through Smart before, which wasn't great. I think it was sampling every 30 minutes. We've actually removed that. We're not doing the temperature monitoring through Smart. We've migrated that over to doing it in the kernel. So on the Linux kernel side, we have the, I think it's MonTemp. I forget the specific kernel name now. And we've extended that. So it'll be the thing that's passively monitoring drive temperatures. And we're going to be sampling that at a 5-minute rate now. So you'll get better visibility into your real world temperature conditions in your graphs, which is a huge win. And it's far lower cost because you're not having to shell out and poll and do user space stuff. The kernel just knows that, and we can sample it.
Exactly. And, drive temperatures is one of those things that's really important for the health of your drives. There was debate a little bit a while ago about, what temperatures your drive should be running at and how hot is too hot. The key is you really want to have that level of insight. If you have a particular drive series line that likes to stay under 40 degrees Celsius, for example, which is what most of Smart reports in is Celsius, you want to be able to know very quickly if it's creeping up to that level, and if a change in your fan curve or your fan arrangement or drive arrangement has given you positive results. You don't want to be sitting there wondering, oh, it's going to be 30 minutes until my drives warm up, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'll see if they've gotten too hot. And by that point, maybe, we've seen some awfully toasty drives with people's
Mm-hmm.
certain configurations. If they have the wrong kind of fans or insufficient quantity or something in these home builds, you don't want your drives to be sitting at 65 or 68 degrees, cooking themselves, and then wondering, hey, why is everything slowing down, or how come things aren't working right? Keep your drives
Absolutely.
cool.
So again, a good basket of changes here coming into the smart functionality. Looking forward to getting that in Goldeye. To remind you, Goldeye's in the fall. That's the 25.10 release. So you'll start seeing betas and noise about that, August, September timeframe. And then, of course, the release in October. Okay. Hopefully that was interesting and informative for everybody to keep you on the bleeding edge. But if you're running the nightlies, go kick the tires now. We'd love the feedback if you're finding any problems. Now let's move on to the questions because we got quite a few. We're going to take several of these today. So first up from Phillipe. Hey guys, I love your tech talk. I'm a proud owner of a TrueNAS Mini XL and I love it. Oh, thank you. Shameless plug there. We love it. Is there still a performance impact on running it on an encrypted pool on a low-powered machine, low single-core performance like the TrueNAS Mini has? He says, I'm referring to a test that Tom from Lawrence Systems YouTube channel did a while ago. The test was comparing core to scale read-write performance on encrypted pools. Scale had a substantial performance penalty on encrypted pools compared to core at that time. That's the keyword, at that time. I was wondering if this is still the case or not, and is there any performance impact on using encrypted pools? Thank you.
All right. Well, Phillipe, the short answer is in this case that it should be no. There was an issue in the early days of Scale. I think it was in the 2212, the Angelfish Bluefin days, where with that Linux 5.x kernel, there were certain floating point instructions. This is like your SSEs, your SSE2 things. They weren't being properly exposed, and this had a major penalty on the native ZFS encryption performance. Those should be resolved now. I think it was in 23.10 we switched to the Linux 6 kernel. So as long as you have a modern processor that has some of these floating point instructions, as well as that AES new instructions set, AES NI, we should be down to kind of like single digit performance overhead. The Mini XLs, the modern ones, Atom processor does have all of these instructions in there. So you shouldn't be seeing a significant performance difference now between encryption on core and encryption on scale. They should both be kind of in that, low single digits performance overhead. Obviously, if you're using much older hardware and you don't have these instructions, then you could hit a scenario where you're actually going to suffer, somewhat significantly. We saw a couple people say they went from, 800 megabytes a second down to 200 or 300 megabytes. So make sure that you're running fairly modern hardware if you are going to use encryption.
Fairly modern. I still think that's what, 6-7 years at this point still. Yeah, it's been in there for a while.
It's been there for a while. AES-NI, I'm pretty sure like that dates back to, the Xeon 5600 series of processors. So we're talking, over a decade at this point. If you're on something older than that, you might want to upgrade just in terms of, power per watt there. Get
Yeah, you have other compelling reasons.
Yeah, unless you're running electric heat in your house anyways, then I mean, by all means, you can, mine Bitcoin on your processor, just keep you warm in winter. All right.
Okay. Well, good question. Thanks, Phillipe.
Thanks. We appreciate it. Our next question here is coming in from Paul, and this one is about SAS topologies. He says, so he's keeping this one short. Why does Scale not support SAS multipathing? The underlying multipath device driver appears to work fine with the LSI, Avago, and Broadcom HBAs, and it did work fine under Core. End of question. Well, thank you, Paul, for keeping this one short and sweet. So the answer is that removing the SAS multipath in TrueNAS was actually a design decision that was made back even before Scale sort of came into fruition there. The multipathing in SAS, it really does add a bit of complexity to what we want to be a really simple system. The key is that it adds that potential for human error, especially when you're cabling in additional disk shelves. We've seen this in the community. A lot of people will have these, repurposed enterprise units where it's a multi-controller disk shelf, and they'll hook up both controllers of it and then say, hey, why are all my disks showing up twice because of this disabled multipath? Even when multipath was present, in order to sort of compile those two into one, you required a certain specific on-disk formatting. And in FreeBSD, that used the G multipath driver. Is it EmpathD under Linux or something now, I believe it is.
Mhm.
But what that also does is, while you have to put that shim layer in, it complicates taking those drives or pools, making them portable, moving them to another physical system, piece of hardware that maybe doesn't use multipathing. So you'd be like, well, now I have to, which strip out the multipathing shim on top of this drive in order to import it. And then in very rare cases, that SAS multipathing, if you have it as, two paths from a single HBA, sometimes it would mishandle things that like drive issues. So if a drive was not responding to an IO command over a single path, whether it was a cable failure, a backplane failure, or something on the drive, the HBA would sometimes just wait for that timeout, which could be, 5 to 7 seconds before trying the other SAS path. And then maybe the drive does respond there. The system will say, well, the drive's healthy, but it might actually be failing. And it would be using that degraded path on the back end. So it would be responding very slowly in that case. But I
Yeah.
know from an enterprise perspective, Chris, I think you have something you can chip in here
Yeah,
as
I was going
well.
to say again, this wasn't necessarily a scale thing. We started this work and looking at it back, I think even in the 12 days going into 13. So it was something we started on core because, as a general philosophy, a storage appliance should be doing everything possible to protect your storage, protect your data. That's the most important thing. That's its primary function, right? And this was a case of, it was like handing a loaded gun to a lot of people and pointing it at their foot and saying, don't pull the trigger. And we actually had some incidents. You can go back and look on the old forums. There were cases where people screwed up their pools as a result and lost data. And that's just like the biggest sin possible, right? So that was what got us going down this path of, this doesn't add enough benefit. It doesn't play nicely with our enterprise products. And it's just something where, again, the benefits weren't high enough to outweigh a lot of the risks and downsides, because we used to see a lot of complaints around this issue.
Yeah, it was especially the case where, if somebody replaced a drive, you would have to apply that multipathing on top of it. Otherwise, they would say, oh, I replaced the drive, and they replaced it only with a single path in there. So either they've got half of that disk, or the second path to that disk is just unavailable entirely. Or the worst condition would be they'd see that, the one pass there, and they go, oh, I must have forgotten to replace this disk. So now they're going to try and put the second path to the disk as a separate ZFS entity. And that's where you get a situation that's a lot similar to some of the reasons we say, hey, when you're doing a virtual TrueNAS, you got to pass a whole storage controller to it.
Mhm.
If you ever get a scenario where two separate systems are trying to have active write to the same ZFS pool at the same time, you're going to have a bad time, as they say.
Yeah.
You French fried when you should have pizzaed. You're going to have a bad time.
Absolutely. So again, we're going to go above and beyond to try and protect the integrity of your data. So that's the real reason. And again, obviously that came fully to fruition in scale, but that started well back in the core days. And since then, I don't regret the decision. I think that's still the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's been a net positive for everyone. You can, if you have, of course, a single controller, two shelves, if you have the ability to do that SAS wide port, so you're connecting both cables to the same side. If your backplane supports that, it means you get, 8 wide SAS lanes instead of 4, so you get greater bandwidth to your shelf. That's the way to do it for the increased capacity and the increased performance that way. So, hey, while we're on the topic of SAS and multiple
Mhm.
paths and all kind of weird things, let's go from dual path to Dual-Actuator. So we got another question that actually came in from Phillipe again. He says, I have another question for the show. Do you plan on supporting Dual-Actuator drives sometime in the future? I'm referring to drives like Seagate's Exos Mach.2 drives. And I think they might have rebranded those to something else. I don't quite remember. But yeah. So those ones, for those who don't understand, the Dual-Actuator means it actually has the two separate sets of write heads that can move independently. Where this is beneficial is for, the cloud-based hyperscalers, the guys who really want to, get a little bit more performance out of spinning disk, but they don't necessarily want to jump up to the idea of flash. So, but outside of that, there is not what I would say a huge push to really support that kind of drive in the enterprise model. It adds some increased complexity to it. You have to sort of either if you're using the SAS version of the drives right now, they aren't actually dual path. They use that second path internally to connect to basically the other half of the drive, the other
Mhm.
actuator. If you're using the SATA drives, what it does is it basically shows it as one giant, 14 or 16 terabyte drive. But just the firmware on the drive says as soon as you cross that halfway boundary, you're now working with the second actuator. So you effectively have to do some logic to split the drive into two on its own. Now, we're aware there's some community scripts that enable those drives. They'll, create the partitions, they'll cut them up for you. And it can be made to work with a lot of customization. But what you do have to be careful of, especially with the SATA versions, is there are certain behaviors and SCSI commands, or SATA commands as well, that do cross those LUN boundaries, and they affect both halves of the drive. Some of the obvious ones are things like, a spindle start stop, for example. Obviously, there might be two actuators moving at separate ways, but there's still only one set of spindles. If you put your drive to sleep, you're trying to save power, both sides of it are going to go offline. And then you're going to have, potentially, if you haven't arranged your pool correctly, you could have these two drives in your same VDEV suddenly decided to say, hey, I'm taking a nap for now. Maybe they go offline. One of the other issues is things like telling your drive to flush its temporary cache. ZFS controls that, of course, when you're pushing these asynchronous writes. It queues them up on the drive, and then it's going to say, hey, that final commit, when we're marking our transaction as complete, we want to do a drive cache flush. That triggers as well on both halves of the drive. There's a single chunk of that volatile cache. You send that flush cache command, it's going to handle it on both sides of the actuators. But the big one that really terrifies me is it's right in the T10 spec for these drives, format unit. That one crosses your LUN boundary. So if you somehow manage to issue a format unit to one of those drives in your stack, it's going to format both of them. I have yet to see a dual actuator drive that separates those two commands. So that is obviously, that's the data integrity challenge. That's what Kris said about, try to avoid opportunities to juggle chainsaws and accidentally lose a limb. So
absolutely. And also at a high level, Kris, too, just like when we add support eventually for NVMe namespaces, there's the logic of how do you construct a pool now? Like the UI, the middleware, everything needs to be aware of, I have this drive, it's actually two drives, but it's actually one. And oh, by the way, maybe you don't want to put both those in the same mirror pair.
Exactly.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah, exactly. It's NVMe namespaces are going to hit some of the same sort of conflicts we do, where it's, the same serial number is going to be present on there, and it's being separated by the logical unit IDs. So how do we make sure, we're going to have to do that middleware work to be able to say, okay, these four logical units all live on the same physical drive, so you can't mirror them with each other, otherwise you compromise your availability.
Mirror them or put them in the same RAID Z by mistake.
Yeah,
like there's just all kinds of fun, weird edge cases it opens up, and more opportunities for people to have an oops moment, and they find out the hard way that I lost a drive and actually lost my whole VDEV.
Exactly. If you make, if you have 4 NVMe namespaces and you make a RAID Z1 of a 3+1 across those, you don't have redundancy. You just have, a very odd choice to configure a little bit of parity on your own internal drive. It's still going to fail entirely if that one physical disk goes offline. So it's kind of one of those strange scenarios where it's likely going to end up with sort of tangential support down the line as we do add support for NVMe namespaces. NVMe namespaces comes with other things that are in there, like quality of service or stuff like that. But it's that main core challenge of, we'd have to basically be supporting, partitioning drives in a way almost.
And the one I really love is when you go to replace that failed drive now. Well, actually, it's replacing multiple devices and multiple VDEVs potentially. It's like, oh, great. I got the risks now of those other VDEVs kicking a device out and, having further parity problems.
Yeah,
it's challenging.
It's a challenge. It's not an insurmountable challenge, obviously. Like I said, these community scripts exist, but there's a lot of sharp edges. You are going to be one of the first couple people down the mountain when you're using dual actuator drives. So you have to be prepared that you could encounter undocumented features, as we like to say. You might need to be willing to do a little bit of experimenting on your own. If you do decide to use these things on your own in your community build, just please be very cautious. Make absolutely sure you have structured your pool VDEVs correctly so that you have redundancy and you don't set yourself up for an accidental moment of, oh no, I just lost 2 drives out of the same VDEV and I only had parity for 1.
Well, very good question, Phillipe, though, and I'm glad you brought it up because it has come up. Others have asked. So glad we got a chance to address it here.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, That was good. We got to a lot today. So first of all, everyone, thanks for watching again. As usual, we're glad to be back this week. We will be back next week with another episode. As always, please make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, send your questions to t3@truenas.com. So Kris and Chris, we know what the pressing issues are, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.